In the gentle twilight between earth and sky, there once unfolded a story that would shape the very essence of human creativity for all time to come. 9 nights. 9 sacred nights beneath stars that shimmered like scattered diamonds across the velvet darkness. 9 nights that whispered of something profound taking root in the fabric of existence itself. Zeus, the mighty king of Olympus, the keeper of thunderbolts and guardian of the celestial realms, the god who had recently concluded the great war with the Titans, found himself drawn to a presence unlike any he had encountered before. This was no ordinary attraction, no fleeting moment of divine passion. This was Mnemosyne, the Titaness of memory herself, and she possessed a gift that even the most powerful of gods could not command through strength alone. The luminous ability to remember everything that had ever been, every whispered word, every melody that had drifted through the ages, every deed both great and small that had rippled across the tapestry of time. Her golden hair cascaded like liquid sunlight, each strand seeming to shimmer with the soft glow of countless remembered moments, countless stories preserved within her eternal consciousness. Her eyes held depths that contained the universe itself, pools of wisdom reflecting every tale ever told, every dream ever dreamed. When she moved, it was with the flowing grace of accumulated experience, each gentle gesture informed by the memory of countless perfect movements witnessed throughout the endless turning of ages. Zeus understood something profound in that quiet moment of recognition. True power, he realized, required more than the ability to command the present moment, to shape the here and now with divine will. It demanded the wisdom to learn from the endless expanse of the past, and the vision to guide the unfolding future toward beauty and meaning. In Mnemosyne, he found the perfect complement to his own nature, a harmony of power and preservation, of authority and memory. Their courtship unfolded unlike any of Zeus's other romantic pursuits. He did not approach her with sudden, overwhelming passion or dramatic displays of divine might. Instead, he came to her with measured appreciation, with reverence and understanding, demonstrating not merely his power, but his worthiness to father children who would serve as eternal guardians of everything that makes existence meaningful and beautiful. The 9 nights of their union took place in a realm gently removed from the ordinary flow of time, a space between moments where the eternal could touch the temporal. Each night carried its own unique character and purpose, its own subtle music and light. The first night blazed softly with the warm fire of epic poetry, stories of heroes and great deeds told beneath the watching stars. The second night flowed like a quiet river with the gentle rhythms of lyric verse, personal and intimate. Subsequent nights resonated with the harmonies of music that seemed to rise from the earth itself, the measured steps of dance that mirrored the turning of the heavens, the thoughtful solemnity of tragedy, the lightness and joy of comedy, the careful precision of history, the wonder and vastness of astronomy, and the eloquence of sacred hymns that connected mortals to the divine. During these encounters, Mnemosyne's divine nature played a role of quiet significance. She retained within her boundless consciousness every moment of beauty that had ever existed, every flash of inspiration, every perfect artistic expression that had graced the world or would ever grace it in ages to come. This vast, shimmering repository of aesthetic experience became the foundation upon which their daughters would build their individual domains, each one a living expression of creativity itself. The symbolic significance of this parentage cannot be overstated, though we speak of it gently, like morning mist revealing shapes in a garden. Zeus contributed the authority and power necessary for the Muses to command respect among both gods and mortals, to be heard when they spoke, to be honored when they inspired. Mnemosyne provided the essential connection to the preservation and transmission of cultural knowledge, ensuring that nothing beautiful, nothing true, Nothing meaningful would ever be truly lost. Their children would embody the perfect synthesis of divine mandate and memorial continuity, of power and preservation united in harmony. As the 9 daughters took form within Mnemosyne's divine womb, each began developing her distinct personality and sphere of influence, like flowers of different varieties growing in the same sacred garden. Unlike mortal births, which represent the beginning of a long journey of learning and growth, the Muses emerged fully formed in their divine consciousness, possessing complete knowledge of their respective arts and an innate, intuitive understanding of their cosmic purpose. They came into being as naturally as dawn comes to the sky, as inevitably as rivers flow to the sea. The birth itself took place on Mount Helicon, that sacred peak in Boeotia that would forever after be woven into the fabric of poetic inspiration. As each muse was born, the very landscape responded to their presence with gentle wonder. Springs of crystal clear water burst forth from the rocky slopes like gifts from the earth itself, their waters imbued with the soft power to grant inspiration to any mortal fortunate enough to drink from them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility, saturated with creative energy, waiting patiently to be channeled into artistic expression, into songs and stories and dances yet to be imagined. 9 daughters emerging into the light like stars appearing at dusk. 9 domains spreading like ripples across still water. 9 eternal guardians of everything that makes human existence meaningful, beautiful, and worthy of remembrance. The mountain itself seemed to welcome them with ancient recognition, as if it had been waiting since the beginning of time for this very moment. The stones resonated with their presence. The winds carried their first breaths across the valleys below. The trees swayed in rhythm with their arrival. Everything that grew on Mount Helicon, from the smallest wildflower to the tallest pine, seemed to lean toward them, drawn by the gentle magnetism of their creative essence. The waters that had sprung forth at their birth did not simply bubble up and disappear. They flowed continuously, creating streams that wound down the mountainside like silver ribbons, pooling in places to form mirrors that reflected not just the sky above, but somehow the infinite possibilities of inspiration itself. These sacred springs would call to mortals in their dreams, drawing poets and musicians and scholars to make the pilgrimage to Helicon, to drink from waters that tasted of starlight and ancient songs. In those first moments of their existence, the 9 sisters looked upon one another with recognition and joy. Though each was distinct, unique in her gifts and her domain, they were bound together by an unbreakable connection, a harmony that would endure through all the ages to come. Calliope, the eldest, already carried the weight of epic stories in her eyes. Clio saw the patterns of history unfolding like scrolls. Euterpe heard melodies in the wind that no one else could hear. Thalia smiled with the lightness of laughter yet to come. Melpomene understood the beauty hidden within sorrow. Terpsichore felt the rhythm of the turning world in her very bones. Erato knew the language of the heart. Polyhymnia sensed the sacred in everything, and Urania gazed upward at the stars with wonder and understanding. Together, they would shape the creative destiny of all who would come after, mortal and divine alike. Together, they would guard the treasures of inspiration, memory, and artistic truth. Together, they would ensure that beauty would never fade from the world, that stories would never cease to be told, that the human spirit would never lose its capacity to create, to express, to transform experience into something transcendent and eternal. This is their story, unfolding gently like petals opening to the morning sun. This is the tale of the 9 sisters who hold the keys to all that is beautiful, all that is true, all that is worthy of being preserved through the long ages of the world. Let us follow their journey together, quietly, peacefully, as one follows a winding path through a moonlit garden, discovering wonders at every turn. Let us walk now through a garden of divine presences, each one unique, each one essential. together forming a constellation of creative power that illuminates the path of mortal aspiration. Calliope stood as the gentle but undisputed leader among her sisters, her authority recognized not through force or demand, but through natural reverence. Her birth had marked the beginning of a new era, a bridge between divine and mortal realms through which the greatest tales of heroism and wonder would flow into human consciousness like water from a mountain spring. Her physical appearance reflected her position with quiet dignity. She possessed a commanding presence that drew the eye naturally, without need for ostentation or dramatic display. Her hair, a deep auburn that seemed to capture and hold the light of inspiration itself, was typically adorned with a simple golden circlet marking her position as the eldest and most revered of the 9 sisters. The circlet sat upon her brow like a crown of sunlight, neither heavy nor burdensome, but rather a natural expression of who she was. Her eyes held depth, suggesting she had witnessed every great deed ever performed, every word of power ever spoken, every sacrifice made in the name of something greater than oneself. When Calliope spoke, her voice carried a resonance that seemed to echo in the listener's heart long after the words themselves had faded into silence. She spoke with careful deliberation, choosing each word as a craftsman chooses each tool, understanding that language itself was a form of creation, that words could build worlds or reduce them to memory. Her primary attributes, the stylus and wax tablets, were far more than mere tools of notation. The stylus, crafted from celestial bronze forged in the workshops of Hephaestus himself, possessed a subtle power to inscribe words that would resonate through eternity, carrying their meaning and emotional weight across vast expanses of time. The wax tablets could hold not merely the physical marks of letters and words, but somehow the very essence of stories themselves, preserving the emotional impact and cultural significance of each tale for future generations yet unborn. Calliope's influence extended far beyond the technical composition of poetry. She served as the divine patron of epic narratives, those sweeping tales that chronicle the adventures of heroes, the interventions of gods, and the pivotal moments that shaped the destiny of nations and peoples. When mortal bards gathered to recite the exploits of legendary warriors or the wanderings of travelers across perilous seas, they called upon Calliope to grant them the eloquence necessary to do justice to such momentous subjects, to make the ancient stories live again in the hearts of listeners. Clio, the second sister, possessed a fundamentally different but equally important presence. Where Calliope dealt with the elevated realm of epic poetry and mythic truth, Clio concerned herself with the patient, meticulous recording and preservation of actual historical events as they unfolded in the mortal world. Her domain encompassed not only the major turning points of civilizations, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the outcomes of great battles, the decisions of rulers that affected thousands, but also the smaller, quieter moments that revealed the underlying patterns governing human behavior and the slow, steady currents of change beneath the surface of daily life. Clio typically appeared as a young woman of serious but gentle demeanor, her dark hair arranged in a practical style that suggested someone who valued function over mere decoration. Her clothing favored simplicity and ease of movement, allowing her to travel freely through the world of mortal affairs, observing, recording, preserving. Most distinctive were the scrolls she invariably carried, their surfaces covered with detailed accounts of events written in her precise, beautiful script that flowed like a quiet river across the pages. Her methodology differed significantly from that of mortal chroniclers, though she worked with them often and kindly. While human historians relied on second-hand accounts, on the stories told by witnesses and survivors, on their own interpretations of events they might not have seen, Cleo possessed the ability to witness historical moments directly, observing the actions of both mortals and gods with perfect clarity and gentle objectivity. She maintained extensive archives in sacred spaces, vast collections containing detailed records of every significant event in both divine and mortal history, preserved against the erosion of time and the distortions of faulty memory. Euterpe, the third sister, brought an entirely different energy to the family constellation, like a bright bird appearing in a tranquil garden. Where her elder sisters dealt with weighty matters of epic and history, Euterpe embodied the joy and spontaneous creativity that characterized lyric poetry and musical innovation. Her domain encompassed not only the technical aspects of musical composition, the arrangement of notes, the patterns of rhythm and melody, but also the emotional and spiritual dimensions of musical experience. The way a simple tune could lift the heart or bring tears to the eyes, the way harmony could speak truths beyond the reach of words. The goddess typically appeared as a figure of vibrant youth and gentle enthusiasm, her golden hair often adorned with fresh flowers that seemed to bloom anew each day, changing with the seasons, changing with her moods, sometimes roses, sometimes lilies, sometimes simple wildflowers gathered from meadows where mortals danced. Her most distinctive attribute was the double flute, an instrument of her own design that possessed capabilities far beyond those of any mortal-crafted musical tool. Euterpe's double flute represented a beautiful advancement in the art of music, combining two separate pipes that allowed for complex harmonies impossible with conventional single-pipe instruments. When she played, the resulting music possessed an almost magical ability to induce profound emotional states in listeners, from ecstatic joy that made the body want to dance, to contemplative serenity that settled over the soul like a warm blanket on a cool evening. The sound was both delicate and powerful, like wind through leaves, like rain on water, like the first bird song of morning. Thalia, the muse of comedy and pastoral poetry, possessed an infectious laugh that could lighten even the heaviest of hearts, and a gift for revealing the absurdities inherent in mortal behavior without ever resorting to cruel mockery or harsh judgment. Her influence extended beyond simple entertainment, to encompass the important social function of comedy as a means of addressing serious issues through humor, of allowing people to see their own follies with affection rather than shame, to laugh at themselves, and in laughing, to heal. She appeared often with a comic mask in hand, though her own face needed no mask to express the full range of human folly and joy. Her eyes sparkled with perpetual amusement, seeing the humor in situations others might find only frustrating or difficult. She reminded mortals that laughter was itself a form of wisdom, that the ability to find joy even in imperfect circumstances was a gift worth cultivating. Melpomene governed the realm of tragedy, that most profound form of dramatic expression, exploring the deepest questions of human existence through the portrayal of loss, change, and moral complexity. Her solemn demeanor and the tragic mask she carried reflected her understanding that true artistic greatness often emerged from humanity's honest confrontation with its own limitations and mortality. Yet there was nothing harsh in Melpomene's presence. She held sorrow gently, with reverence, understanding that grief and loss were part of the great tapestry of existence, worthy of being witnessed and transformed through art into something bearable, even beautiful. Terpsichore embodied the art of dance in all its forms, from sacred ritual movements performed in honor of the gods to spontaneous expressions of joy, accompanying festivals and celebrations. Her influence transformed dance from mere physical movement into a form of communication expressing emotions and ideas beyond the capacity of words alone. To watch her move was to understand that the body itself could be an instrument of poetry, That gesture and posture could tell stories as complex and moving as any epic verse. She moved through the world with effortless grace, as if the air itself supported her steps. Even her smallest gesture carried intention and beauty. She taught mortals that movement could be prayer, could be story, could be the expression of the soul's deepest longings and highest joys. Erato specialized in love poetry and the arts of romantic expression, that most personal and emotionally charged form of literary creation. Her domain encompassed not only the celebration of passionate romance, but also the exploration of love's complexities, its contradictions, its capacity to elevate and to devastate, to inspire and to transform. She understood that love was perhaps the most universal of human experiences, touching every life in one form or another, and that the attempt to express love through words and song was one of humanity's most ancient and enduring creative impulses. She appeared as a figure of gentle beauty, her presence somehow making the world around her seem more vivid, more alive. When Erato was near, colors seemed richer, fragrances more intense, the very air seemed charged with possibility. She carried a lyre and often crowned herself with roses or myrtle, flowers sacred to Aphrodite, the goddess of love herself. Polyhymnia governed the composition and performance of sacred hymns, those musical and poetic works specifically created to honor the gods and facilitate religious experience. Her influence ensured that sacred music possessed the power to elevate mortal consciousness, to create spaces where the divine and human could meet and commune. She was often depicted in an attitude of quiet contemplation, sometimes with a finger to her lips and a gesture suggesting sacred silence, the stillness from which all genuine prayer emerges. Her presence brought a sense of reverence to any space. When Polyhymnia entered a room, conversations naturally quieted, hearts naturally opened to deeper reflection. She taught that some truths could only be approached through silence and sacred sound, through music that pointed beyond itself to mysteries too profound for ordinary speech. Urania, the youngest of the 9 sisters, presided over astronomy and the mathematical sciences, her domain encompassing humanity's attempts to understand the cosmic order through careful observation and rational analysis. Unlike her sisters who worked primarily through emotional and aesthetic inspiration, Urania guided mortals toward intellectual discoveries revealing the underlying patterns governing celestial movements, the elegant mathematical relationships that structured the universe itself. She appeared often with a celestial globe in her hands, her eyes turned upward toward the stars with a mixture of wonder and understanding. She wore a cloak that seemed to be woven from the night sky itself, dark fabric scattered with points of light that moved and shifted like the actual constellations. Urania taught that reason and wonder were not opposites but partners, that the mind's attempt to comprehend the vastness of the cosmos was itself a form of worship, a way of honoring the divine intelligence that had crafted such elegant order from primal chaos. 9 sisters, each unique, each essential. 9 domains that together encompass the full spectrum of human creative and intellectual achievement. 9 pathways to excellence. 9 invitations to transcend the ordinary and touch something eternal. But they did not work in isolation, these divine sisters. They were part of a larger cosmic order, a larger divine family, and they found their activities harmonized and guided by another divine presence, a God whose own domains overlapped beautifully with their own. Here is something beautiful and important to understand about the Muses. They found their activities guided and harmonized by a divine partnership that would define the nature of artistic inspiration for all the ages to come. Apollo, the god of music, poetry, prophecy, healing, and the radiant sun itself became known as Apollo Musages, the leader of the Muses. This was not a conquest or a taking of power, but rather a natural harmony. a partnership that emerged like morning light emerging from darkness, inevitable and right. Apollo's role as leader of his 9 half-sisters evolved through a graceful process of mutual recognition and understanding. His existing dominion over music and poetry created a natural overlap with the Muses' spheres of influence, particularly those of Calliope, Euterpe, and Polyhymnia. Rather than allowing this overlap to generate tension or conflict, the divine siblings developed a sophisticated working relationship based on respect, collaboration, and shared purpose. When Apollo assumed his role as MUSES, something in his presence subtly transformed. While maintaining his characteristic golden hair and radiant beauty that seemed to carry the very light of the sun, the god adopted a more measured, contemplative demeanor. His traditional attributes, the silver bow and arrows that marked his capacity for swift divine judgment, were set gently aside during his time with the Muses. In their place he carried the 7-stringed lyre that became the symbol of his artistic leadership, an instrument whose beauty matched his own. This lyre, originally crafted from a tortoise shell by the infant Hermes in a moment of inspired mischief, and later perfected by Apollo himself through patient divine craftsmanship, possessed tonal qualities that could harmonize with any of the Muses' individual specialties. Its voice could soar with Calliope's epic grandeur, dance with Euterpe's playful melodies, mourn with Melpomene's tragic depths, or calculate with Urania's mathematical precision. Mount Parnassus became the primary seat of this divine artistic collaboration, a place where heaven and earth seemed to meet in perfect balance. Unlike Mount Helicon, which remained the Muses' birthplace and personal sanctuary, a place of their origins and private retreat, Parnassus became a shared domain where Apollo's rational approach to artistic excellence merged like 2 streams joining into one river with the Muses' intuitive understanding of creative inspiration. The mountain's twin peaks symbolize this beautiful duality, one dedicated to Apollo's solar worship and rational artistic principles, the other serving as sacred space where the Muses could express their individual creative energies without constraint, could be fully themselves. The daily rituals at Parnassus reflected the careful balance Apollo maintained between providing guidance and respecting his sisters' individual autonomy and creative sovereignty. Each dawn brought a gathering where the 9 Muses would arrange themselves in a formation that had evolved naturally over time, each sister finding her place as naturally as stars arranged themselves in the night sky. Calliope, as the eldest and bearer of epic authority, positioned herself at Apollo's right hand, her presence both validating his leadership and ensuring that the dignity of her own art remained properly represented. The morning ceremonies began with Apollo's gentle invocation of their father Zeus, acknowledging the divine authority that legitimized both his leadership and the Muses' inspirational roles. This invocation took the form of a complex musical composition that incorporated elements from each of the 9 sisters' domains, weaving them together like threads in a tapestry, creating a harmonious blend that demonstrated the potential for artistic unity without sacrificing individual creative identity. As Apollo played the opening measures on his lyre, the notes rising clear and pure into the morning air, each muse would join the performance in turn, adding her own voice, her own unique contribution to the emerging symphony. Clio's participation involved the rhythmic recitation of significant historical events, her precise cadences providing a temporal framework, a sense of time flowing like a river beneath the music. Euterpe's double flute wove melodic variations around Apollo's lyre, creating harmonic complexities that elevated the entire performance, that made the air itself seem to shimmer with sound. Thalia's contributions came through carefully timed interjections of wit and gentle humor that prevented the ceremony from becoming overly solemn, that reminded everyone that joy too was sacred, that laughter had its place even in the most reverent of gatherings. Melpomene's tragic sensibilities added emotional depth, a sense of the profound seriousness of the artistic endeavor, the weight of beauty and meaning they were creating together. Terpsichore's role involved creating dance movements that visually represented the musical and poetic elements being performed, her body becoming another instrument in the divine orchestra. Her choreography served as a form of sacred sign language, communicating artistic concepts to mortal observers who might lack the sophisticated understanding necessary to fully appreciate the verbal and musical components alone, translating divine inspiration into physical form. Erato's contributions focused on the emotional undertones, connecting the formal artistic elements to personal experiences of love and longing and connection, reminding everyone that art ultimately served the human heart. Polyhymnia's sacred hymns provided the spiritual foundation, creating a sense of reverence that elevated the proceedings beyond mere artistic display into genuine religious experience, into communion with the divine itself. Urania's contributions brought intellectual rigor and cosmic perspective, her voice incorporating astronomical and mathematical principles into the musical arrangements, revealing the deep connections between artistic beauty and universal order, between inspiration and the fundamental structures of reality itself. The evening rituals followed a different pattern, reflecting the changing energy of the day as light faded and stars emerged. Where morning ceremonies emphasized the more formal public aspects of divine artistic authority, evening gatherings focused on intimate creative collaboration and the exploration of artistic possibilities that required sustained contemplation that could only emerge in quiet and darkness. Apollo's role in these evening sessions demonstrated his understanding that different types of leadership were required for different purposes. His lyre playing became more improvisational, responding to and building upon the creative initiatives taken by whichever muse felt moved to lead a particular segment. Sometimes Euterpe would begin with a simple melody, which Apollo would then elaborate upon, which Terpsichore would transform into movement, which Erato would infuse with emotional meaning, until the whole company found themselves caught up in a spontaneous creative flow that seemed to have no single author, but rather emerged from their collective inspiration. The symbolic significance of Apollo's leadership extended far beyond the practical organization of divine activities. His role as MUSES represented the gentle but necessary imposition of rational order upon the inherently chaotic nature of pure creative inspiration, the transformation of raw artistic energy into forms that could be effectively transmitted to mortals without overwhelming them. This was not the harsh order of a tyrant, but the supportive structure of a framework that allowed growth, like a trellis allows a vine to reach toward the sun. This function required delicate balance, walking a narrow path between providing sufficient structure to make divine inspiration accessible to human understanding, while avoiding rigid systematization that might suppress the spontaneous creativity that was the very lifeblood of artistic creation. Too much structure would kill inspiration, too little would leave it formless and useless to mortal recipients. The intermediary function the Muses performed between Apollo's divine will and mortal artistic expression represented one of the most beautiful and complex aspects of their relationship. Apollo's nature as a major Olympian deity meant that his direct intervention in mortal affairs often carried consequences far beyond the immediate artistic context. When the god chose to inspire a mortal poet directly, the resulting work might possess such overwhelming power that it discouraged rather than encouraged further human creative efforts, intimidating lesser talents into silence. The Muses, by gentle contrast, could modulate their inspirational gifts to match the capacity and needs of individual mortal recipients. They learned to recognize the difference between mortals who needed encouragement to overcome self-doubt and those who required gentle guidance to prevent their confidence from overwhelming their judgment. They understood that different people needed different types of inspiration, that what worked for one artist might confuse or discourage another. This intermediary role required the Muses to develop sophisticated understanding of human psychology, to become students of the mortal heart and mind. They served as translators, converting the pure abstract artistic ideals that Apollo represented into practical guidance that mortals could understand and implement within the constraints and limitations of human life, within the bounds of mortal skill and mortal time. The partnership between Apollo and the Muses created something neither could achieve alone, a system for delivering divine inspiration to mortals in doses they could actually use, in forms they could actually grasp and work with, transforming the overwhelming radiance of divine perfection into gentle light that illuminated without blinding. Together they formed a bridge between heaven and earth, between the eternal and the temporal, between divine perfection and mortal aspiration. And this bridge remains standing still, spanning the ages, available to any who seek it with humble hearts and genuine dedication to the creation of beauty. The sacred geography of divine inspiration finds its most profound expression in the ancient connection between the Nine Sisters and Mount Helicon, that towering peak in Boeotia, where the boundary between earth and heaven seems to dissolve into something altogether more mysterious and beautiful. This mountain, rising majestically from the fertile plains below like a natural temple reaching toward the sky, has served as witness to wonders beyond mortal reckoning. Its rocky slopes still bear the invisible imprints of the Muses' birth, that momentous event when 9 divine presences entered the world simultaneously, transforming the very nature of the place forever. The stones of Helicon seem to pulse with residual creative energy, their crystalline structures subtly altered by prolonged exposure to the concentrated artistic power that radiates continuously from the 9 goddesses who claim this peak as their eternal dwelling place. The mountain's physical characteristics reflect its supernatural significance in ways that ordinary geography cannot explain. Its slopes display an unusual variety of vegetation, with sacred groves appearing at elevations where such plant life should not, by any natural law, be able to survive. These groves consist primarily of laurel trees, their glossy leaves rustling constantly with sounds that seem to carry half-formed melodies and whispered verses, fragments of songs not yet fully born into the world. Ancient olive trees, their gnarled trunks bearing the scars of centuries, grow alongside delicate flowering vines that bloom throughout the entire year regardless of seasonal changes, as if spring were eternal on these sacred slopes. The quality of light on Mount Helicon differs subtly from the light in the valleys below. It seems softer somehow, more luminous, as if the air itself carries a gentle radiance. Mornings arrive with a particular sweetness, the sun rising over the mountain's eastern face and touching the slopes with gold. Evenings linger longer than they should, the fading light holding on as if reluctant to abandon such a beautiful place. The caves that honeycomb Helicon's interior serve as natural amphitheaters and private sanctuaries where the Muses can retreat for solitary contemplation or collaborative artistic experimentation. These caverns possess acoustic properties that enhance and purify sound in remarkable ways, as if the mountain itself were a vast musical instrument. When Euterpe plays her double flute within these spaces, the music seems to acquire additional dimensions, with echoes and reverberations creating harmonic complexities that surpass even her divine instrument's normal capabilities. The sound doesn't simply bounce off stone walls, it seems to be embraced by the cave, transformed, returned as something richer and more complex. The most sacred of these cave systems lies deep within the mountain's heart, accessible only through a narrow passage that requires even divine visitors to humble themselves, to crawl for considerable distances through darkness before emerging into a vast circular chamber. This inner sanctum contains natural formations resembling carved altars and throne-like seats arranged in a perfect circle, as if the mountain itself had prepared a meeting place for the 9 sisters. Here the Muses gathered during the darkest nights of winter to renew their own inspirational powers through intensive collaborative sessions, creating works of art that no mortal will ever witness, art created purely for the joy of creation itself. The transformation of Helicon's landscape following the Muses' arrival demonstrated the profound impact that sustained divine presence can have on the physical world. Springs that had previously produced ordinary water, useful but unremarkable, began flowing with liquid possessing quite extraordinary properties. These waters carry subtle traces of divine essence that can enhance memory, sharpen perception, and increase sensitivity to artistic beauty. The water itself looks like ordinary water, clear and clean, but to drink from these springs is to experience something transcendent, a subtle shift in consciousness, a gentle opening of inner doors. Mortal poets, who make the arduous journey to Helicon and successfully locate these springs, find their creative abilities permanently enhanced, elevated to new levels they had not imagined possible. But the enhancement comes with a price, as all divine gifts do, never again being fully satisfied with ordinary human company or conventional artistic expression. Once you have tasted waters touched by divinity, once you have felt the presence of the Muses on their sacred mountain, the regular world seems somehow diminished, less vivid, less alive. It is a beautiful burden to carry, this knowledge of what is possible, this hunger for inspiration that can never be fully satisfied. The wildlife inhabiting Helicon's slopes also reflects the mountain's supernatural character. Birds nesting in the sacred groves sing with unusual complexity and beauty, their songs incorporating melodic elements that seem to echo the musical innovations of Euterpe and her sisters. Visitors report hearing nightingales, whose melodies bring tears to the eyes, whose music seems to speak of longing and beauty in ways that transcend ordinary birdsong. Butterflies of extraordinary size and coloration flutter among the perpetually blooming flowers, their wing patterns displaying designs that resemble written scripts in languages predating human civilization, ancient symbols whose meanings are felt rather than understood. But the most dramatic transformation of Helicon's sacred geography came through an unexpected visitor, a meeting between divine powers that would create one of the most celebrated sources of inspiration in all the ancient world. The creation of the Hippocrene Spring represents one of the most beautiful events in Helicon's long history. This miraculous water source came into existence through the intervention of Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse born from divine and monstrous union, a creature of impossible beauty and grace. The divine steed had been wandering the skies in search of a suitable earthly dwelling place, flying over mountains and valleys, over seas and plains, seeking somewhere that resonated with his own supernatural nature. When he encountered the 9 sisters performing one of their collaborative artistic ceremonies on Helicon's highest peak, something in him recognized kindred spirits. Pegasus descended toward the mountain with effortless grace, his powerful wings creating air currents that caused the sacred groves to sway in rhythmic patterns that complemented the Muses' performance. As he approached the peak, the horse seemed to recognize the artistic significance of what he witnessed, his own divine nature resonating with the creative energies emanating from the 9 goddesses like a tuning fork, vibrating in response to a pure note. The moment his hooves touched the rocky summit, The mountain itself seemed to acknowledge the presence of another divine being, trembling slightly as if welcoming a long-awaited guest. It was not a violent shaking, not an earthquake, but rather a subtle vibration, a welcoming. The Muses, rather than being startled by this sudden appearance, immediately recognized Pegasus as a kindred spirit, another divine being devoted to beauty and grace. Calliope approached the magnificent creature first, her movements deliberate and respectful, understanding that even divine beings appreciate courtesy. The winged horse responded with evident pleasure, lowering his great head in a gesture that conveyed both greeting and gentle submission to her artistic authority. What followed was a spontaneous collaboration between divine horse and divine maidens, an improvised celebration of shared joy in creative expression. As the Muses resumed their performance, Pegasus began moving in harmony with their artistic expression, his hooves striking the rocky ground in patterns that provided percussive accompaniment to their music. The rhythm of his movements seemed to channel the very heartbeat of creative inspiration itself, a steady pulse that grounded and supported the more complex melodies and verses flowing from the Nine Sisters. The climactic moment came when Pegasus, caught up in the ecstasy of collaborative artistic expression, overwhelmed by the joy of what they were creating together, reared up on his hind legs and brought his front hooves down with tremendous but focused force against a particular spot on the peak. The impact, empowered not by violence, but by the concentrated creative energies surrounding the ceremony, opened the stone and released underground waters that had been trapped within the mountain's depths for countless ages, waiting for this moment. These waters, having absorbed the mountain's accumulated spiritual power over millennia, burst forth as a spring of unprecedented purity and potency, a gift from the mountain's heart to the divine beings who graced its summit. The water from this newly created spring possessed qualities that immediately distinguished it from any other natural source. Its clarity exceeded that of the finest crystal, allowing observers to see through its depths with perfect transparency, while simultaneously revealing shifting patterns and images that seemed to change depending on who was looking, what they needed to see. The taste carried subtle flavors that awakened dormant areas of consciousness, creating sensations that combined physical refreshment with intellectual stimulation and emotional elevation. To drink from Hippocrene was to experience a gentle transformation, a subtle expansion of awareness and creative capacity. The Muses recognized immediately that Pegasus had created something of extraordinary significance, a permanent source of inspirational power that could serve mortals for generations to come, for as long as humans sought beauty and meaning through artistic creation. They blessed the spring with their combined authority, each sister contributing her particular gift to the waters. Calliope's blessing ensured that poets who drank from Hippocrene would find their voices strengthened for epic composition, their ability to craft grand narratives enhanced. Clio's contribution provided enhanced memory and the ability to perceive historical patterns, to see the connections between past and present. Euterpe's blessing infused the water with musical properties that awakened dormant melodic sensibilities, that helped musicians hear harmonies they had never noticed before. Thalia's gift added the spark of wit and gentle humor, the ability to find joy and laughter even in difficult circumstances. Melpomene's contribution brought depth of emotional understanding, the capacity to transform sorrow into beauty. Terpsichore blessed the spring with kinesthetic awareness that enhanced physical grace, that helped dancers feel rhythm in their very bones. Erato's blessing awakened the capacity for deep emotional expression, particularly in matters of love and connection. Polyhymnia's contribution sanctified the spring as a source of religious inspiration, creating a connection between artistic and spiritual experience. Urania's final blessing connected the spring to cosmic forces, ensuring that those who drank would better understand the mathematical and celestial order underlying all creation. The establishment of Hippocrene as a pilgrimage destination gradually transformed Mount Helicon from a private sanctuary into a public center of artistic inspiration, drawing visitors from across the known world. Poets came seeking enhancement of their abilities. Musicians came hoping to hear new melodies. Scholars came looking for clarity of thought, and many simply came to experience the presence of the divine, to stand in a place where the boundary between earth and heaven grew thin enough to cross. The Castalian Spring at Delphi represented a different but equally significant manifestation of the Muses' influence over sacred waters. Located on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, that other great seat of divine artistic activity, this spring served a dual function of providing prophetic inspiration to the Pythia, Apollo's oracle, while also offering artistic enlightenment to poets and musicians seeking to combine their creative gifts with deeper spiritual understanding. The water of the Castalian Spring possessed different qualities from Hippocrene, reflecting its different purpose and location. While Hippocrene's waters primarily enhanced creative abilities, Castalian water carried prophetic properties that opened mortal consciousness to perception of future possibilities and hidden truths. It was cooler than Hippocrene, its taste sharper, more startling, water that woke you up rather than easing you into dreams. Two mountains standing like pillars supporting the sky. Two springs flowing with waters touched by divinity. Two pathways to divine inspiration, each unique, each necessary. But not everyone who sought these sacred waters approached them with the humility and reverence such gifts required. Not everyone understood that divine inspiration was a gift to be received gratefully, not a prize to be claimed through arrogance. The sacred groves of Mount Helicon had witnessed countless acts of mortal devotion and divine inspiration, countless pilgrims arriving with humble hearts to seek the Muses' blessing. But the mountain would also witness moments of hubris, of pride overwhelming wisdom, moments that would serve as enduring lessons about the proper relationship between mortal aspiration and divine authority. One such moment arrived with Thamyris, the Thracian bard whose extraordinary talent had elevated him to legendary status throughout the northern kingdoms. This young musician, born in the wild mountains of Thrace where winds carried ancient melodies and streams sang with primordial rhythms, possessed abilities that surpassed those of any mortal performer of his generation. His voice could move warriors to tears. His lyre playing could calm savage beasts roaming the wilderness paths. His compositions combined technical brilliance with emotional depth in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Yet these very gifts, given partially through divine heritage and partially through dedicated practice, would ultimately lead him toward a choice that would alter his life forever. Thamyris had inherited his musical abilities from his mother Argiope, a nymph of considerable artistic talent who had caught the attention of a river god. Their union produced a child whose mixed heritage manifested in musical capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations without quite reaching the level of full divinity. He existed in a middle space, more than mortal but not quite divine, and this ambiguous position may have contributed to the confusion that would later overcome him. From earliest childhood, Thamyris displayed an intuitive understanding of melody and rhythm that required no formal instruction. He could reproduce any song after hearing it once, could improvise complex variations on simple themes, could compose original works that seemed to channel emotions and experiences beyond his years. His natural gifts were undeniable, remarkable, worthy of celebration. As Thamyris matured and his reputation spread throughout Thrace and beyond, he began attracting audiences that included not only mortal listeners, but also various minor deities, nymphs and spirits inhabiting the wild regions of northern Greece. These supernatural beings, themselves possessed of artistic sensibilities exceeding ordinary human understanding, recognized in the young bard a talent that approached their own capabilities. Their approval and encouragement, while genuinely meant as honor and support, gradually began to instill in Thamyris a sense of his own exceptional abilities that, unfortunately, hardened into something less healthy. The transformation from confident performer to challenger of divine authority occurred gradually over several years. Each successful performance reinforced his belief in his own exceptional nature. The constant praise from audiences who had never encountered such musical mastery began slowly distorting his understanding of his place in the greater cosmic order, began making him forget that his gifts, however impressive, were ultimately rooted in divine heritage and divine favor. The crucial turning point came during a festival where Thamyris performed before an audience that included several who had heard divine music, who knew the difference between mortal excellence and true divinity. His performance that evening surpassed even his previous achievements, with musical passages of such complexity and beauty that listeners later claimed the experience had touched something deep within them, had opened doors in their hearts they hadn't known existed. The overwhelming response, including enthusiastic declarations comparing his abilities favorably to those of the legendary muses themselves, planted a dangerous seed in the young bard's mind. In the weeks following this triumph, Thamyris found himself increasingly preoccupied with questions about the ultimate limits of artistic achievement. He began wondering, at first idly, then with growing conviction, whether the muses themselves, despite their divine status, could truly surpass the level of musical mastery he had attained through his heritage and dedicated practice. The decision to seek out the muses and propose a contest emerged from this gradual accumulation of pride. Thamyris convinced himself that such a challenge represented not arrogance but a legitimate test of artistic merit, a fair comparison between different approaches to musical excellence. The formal challenge was issued during summer when the muses traditionally gathered at their sacred spring on Mount Helicon. Thamyris arrived at the mountain carrying his precious lyre, his confidence both his greatest strength and his greatest vulnerability. The terms he proposed revealed the extent to which pride had clouded his judgment. If he proved victorious, he sought not only recognition as the supreme artist, but also privileges that misunderstood the very nature of the muses and their function. His proposed stakes in case of defeat were equally extreme. He would forfeit both his musical talents and his physical sight, accepting blindness and silence as the price of his presumption. The muses received this challenge with a mixture of sadness and understanding. They recognized that Thamyris's abilities were genuine, that his confidence had some foundation in real skill. They also understood that he had lost perspective, that he needed guidance back toward proper humility. They accepted the challenge not from pride or anger, but from a desire to teach, to correct, to restore proper understanding. The contest took place in a natural amphitheater formed by Helicon slopes, with an audience including various minor deities and spirits who came to witness this confrontation between mortal confidence and divine authority. Thamyris performed first, presenting a composition that represented the culmination of his artistic development, everything he had learned and practiced and perfected over years of dedicated effort. His playing demonstrated remarkable technical proficiency with passages of extraordinary complexity. The melody lines possessed emotional intensity that moved even the divine audience. His rhythmic variations displayed creativity that pushed the boundaries of what musical instruments could achieve through mortal hands. The young bard's performance lasted for nearly an hour, during which he maintained a level of technical excellence that would have established him as a master musician under any other circumstances. When he finished, the audience sat in respectful silence, genuinely moved by what they had witnessed. The Muses' response began with Calliope stepping forward to acknowledge the exceptional quality of Thamyrus's performance with gentle honesty, making clear that his technical proficiency was indeed remarkable. But she also, kindly but firmly, explained that technical proficiency alone, however impressive, could not substitute for divine inspiration, for the connection to sources of creativity that flowed from beyond the individual self. Her own performance demonstrated the difference in ways that transcended simple comparison. Where Thamyrus had impressed through complexity and technical mastery, Calliope touched her audience through profound simplicity that characterized genuine artistic truth. Her music didn't overwhelm, it invited. It didn't demand admiration, it offered beauty as a gift. Each of the 9 sisters contributed to the divine response, their individual performances building upon one another to create a collaborative statement that revealed the full scope of their creative authority while maintaining a quality of gentleness, of teaching rather than punishing. As the divine performance unfolded, Thamyrus began to understand the nature of his error. The realization came not as a sudden blow, but as a gradual dawning awareness that he had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of artistic achievement, that his own considerable talents represented merely the beginning of a journey toward the kind of mastery the Muses embodied. The transformation that followed fulfilled the terms he himself had proposed. His musical abilities gradually faded, not violently stripped away, but gently receding like tide going out, leaving him standing on a shore that suddenly seemed vast and empty. The darkness that claimed his vision came softly, not as punishment, but as consequence, as the inevitable result of choices made. In his blindness and silence, Thamyrus wandered for many years, and in that wandering, in that enforced humility and quiet, he finally learned the lessons he had needed to learn. He became, in his own way, a teacher himself, his story serving as a gentle but firm reminder to other artists about the importance of gratitude, humility, and proper understanding of where creative gifts truly originate. The tale of Thamyrus spread throughout the Greek world, told not with harshness, but with a kind of compassionate sadness, a reminder that talent without wisdom could lead even the gifted astray. That reverence and humility were not weaknesses, but essential virtues for anyone who sought to create beauty in the world. But this lesson, powerful as it was, would need to be taught again, for human nature tends toward forgetting, toward thinking that this time, this person might be the exception. The lesson of Thamyrus, while widely known, did not prevent others from making similar errors of judgment, from allowing pride to overcome the wisdom that should have guided their relationship with divine inspiration and authority. In the kingdom of Amathia, nestled among the fertile valleys of northern Macedonia, where rivers ran clear and harvests came abundantly, there lived a wealthy merchant named Pierus. He had 9 daughters, each talented in her own right, each trained in one of the artistic disciplines corresponding to the 9 Muses' domains. Unlike Thamyrus, whose abilities stemmed partly from divine heritage through his nymph mother, these young women were entirely mortal. Their skills had been developed through intensive training and natural aptitude rather than supernatural gifts. This fact makes their story all the more poignant, for they had achieved genuine excellence through purely human effort, an accomplishment worthy of pride. But they allowed that justified pride to transform into something else entirely. Pierus had spared no expense in providing his daughters with the finest artistic education available in the mortal world. He had imported master teachers from Athens, Thebes, and other cultural centers, creating what amounted to a private academy where the 9 sisters could develop their respective talents under expert guidance. His motivations were mixed: genuine love for his daughters, combined with a merchant's understanding of how cultural prestige could enhance family standing and economic opportunity. the daughters applied themselves to their studies with dedication and genuine passion. The eldest specialized in epic poetry and had memorized vast portions of existing heroic cycles, while also composing original works of considerable merit. Another devoted herself to historical composition, creating detailed chronicles that demonstrated impressive research and narrative skills. A third had mastered the double flute with proficiency that drew audiences from neighboring kingdoms, her performances technically accomplished and emotionally expressive. There was a daughter who composed comic verses, another who wrote tragedies, one who excelled in dance, one who specialized in love poetry, one who composed sacred hymns, and the youngest who had developed expertise in mathematical and astronomical subjects. Together, they represented a remarkable concentration of artistic talent, a family that had achieved something genuinely extraordinary through dedication and education. The combined reputation of these 9 sisters grew steadily over the years. Visitors to Amathia often made special journeys to attend their performances. Their father organized formal concerts showcasing all 9 daughters in collaborative presentations that had become major cultural attractions, bringing prestige and economic benefits to the entire region. The gradual transformation from justified confidence to excessive pride began almost imperceptibly. A visiting poet made an offhand comment comparing their abilities favorably to those of the legendary MUSES, intending the remark as hyperbolic praise rather than serious assessment. But the seed, once planted, found fertile ground in soil already prepared by years of acclaim and success. The sisters began discussing among themselves whether their mortal status might actually provide certain advantages over divine counterparts. They reasoned that their direct experience with human emotions and challenges gave their artistic works an authenticity and relevance that divine beings existing in realms of perfection might not be able to match. It was not an entirely unreasonable thought, but it led them toward a deeply unreasonable conclusion. Eventually, encouraged by their father and convinced by their own logic, they decided to issue a formal challenge to the MUSES themselves, proposing a contest that would, they believed, demonstrate the value of mortal created art. The challenge was delivered through intermediaries to Mount Helicon, framed in terms attempting to make the proposed contest sound like a mutual exploration of artistic excellence rather than a direct competition. But the underlying presumption was clear enough. These mortal women believed they could match or exceed the creative abilities of divine beings, whose very existence was defined by their artistic authority. The MUSES received this challenge with profound concern. They recognized that these sisters, unlike Thamaris, possessed no supernatural advantages, no divine heritage to excuse or explain their confidence. This made their challenge both more presumptuous and more pitiable. Yet the MUSES also understood that refusing the challenge would likely result in the sisters' continued propagation of their mistaken beliefs, potentially leading others astray as well. A contest was arranged in a neutral location, with local nymphs serving as judges. The daughters of Pierus performed first, presenting a collaborative work they had spent months perfecting. Their composition attempted to demonstrate mastery of all 9 artistic disciplines through an integrated presentation. The performance was, by mortal standards, genuinely impressive. Their technical skills were real, their creative abilities substantial, their dedication evident in every carefully crafted line and practiced movement. Had they presented this work humbly, as an offering of mortal achievement seeking divine blessing rather than divine competition, it might have earned them honor and recognition. But the thematic content of their work revealed the flaw in their thinking. They had created art that elevated mortal achievement while diminishing divine authority. that portrayed the gods as capricious rather than just, that fundamentally misunderstood the relationship between human and divine. When the Muses presented their response, the difference became immediately apparent to everyone present. It was not simply that the divine sisters possessed greater technical skill, though they certainly did. It was that their art carried a quality of truth and depth that no amount of technical proficiency could manufacture, that came from their connection to sources of inspiration beyond individual talent. Calliope's opening recitation drew upon the same epic traditions the eldest daughter had attempted to emulate, but her verses revealed deeper meanings, showed the moral and spiritual significance underlying heroic tales. Clio's historical contributions offered perspectives that encompassed both mortal and divine actions within a coherent narrative of cosmic justice. Euterpe's music transcended mere technical accomplishment to touch something essential in the listener's souls. Each muse in turn demonstrated not superior skill alone, but superior understanding of the purposes their respective arts were meant to serve. The judgment rendered by the nymph arbiters was unanimous, delivered with sadness at what would necessarily follow. The transformation that came upon the daughters of Pieris was neither cruel nor vindictive, but it was permanent. They found themselves changing into magpies, their human forms dissolving as feathers sprouted, and their voices transformed into chattering that could mimic sounds, but could never again create true meaning. This particular transformation carried symbolic weight. Magpies can mimic, can reproduce sounds they've heard, but they cannot compose, cannot create new beauty or meaning. The daughters who had possessed real abilities they had corrupted through pride became creatures that could only copy, could only repeat, forever stripped of the genuine creative capacity they had once possessed and misused. Their father Pieris, witnessing this transformation, finally understood the magnitude of the error he had encouraged. He spent the remainder of his days in quiet contemplation, his merchant's confidence in his ability to acquire and display excellence replaced by humble understanding of the limits of human achievement and the importance of reverence toward divine authority. The story of the daughters of Pieris spread throughout the Greek world alongside the tale of Thamyris, two cautionary lessons taught not through arbitrary divine cruelty, but through the natural consequences of pride and presumption. Together, these stories reminded mortals that excellence and humility must walk hand in hand, that the greatest artists are those who understand that their gifts come not from themselves alone, but from sources beyond their individual selves. Two tales of pride meeting divine correction, two reminders of the importance of humility, two lessons that, while firm, were ultimately acts of education rather than mere punishment. But not all mortal artists made such errors. There were some who understood perfectly the proper relationship between human talent and divine inspiration, who achieved extraordinary things precisely because they maintained appropriate reverence and humility. Among all the mortals who received the Muses' favor throughout the long ages of the world, none forged as profound and harmonious a connection with these divine sisters as Orpheus, the legendary musician whose extraordinary abilities represented the beautiful synthesis of mortal dedication and divine inspiration working in perfect balance. Born in Thrace to royal lineage and blessed from his very first breath with the special patronage of Calliope herself, Orpheus embodied the highest possibilities of what could be achieved when human talent aligned harmoniously with celestial guidance, when pride gave way to gratitude, when ambition was tempered by reverence. Calliope's decision to extend her particular favor to this mortal child reflected both her recognition of his exceptional potential and her desire to demonstrate what became possible when divine inspiration found truly worthy earthly vessels, vessels that remained open, humble, receptive. Unlike Thamyris or the daughters of Pieris, whose pride had led them to view their abilities as personal accomplishments independent of divine influence, as achievements that somehow made them equal or superior to their divine benefactors. Orpheus approached his musical gifts with the humility and reverence that allowed Calliope's inspiration to flow through him without obstruction, without the blockage that pride creates. Calliope first encountered the infant Orpheus during one of her regular journeys through the mortal realm, those periodic visits when she would descend from Mount Helicon to observe cultural developments taking place among various human communities. She found herself drawn to the court of King Oeagrus by reports of unusual phenomena occurring around the royal child recently born to the king. Witnesses described birds gathering in unprecedented numbers around the infant's cradle, their songs creating complex harmonies that seemed to respond to the baby's movements and sounds. Wild animals that normally avoided human settlements had been observed approaching the palace grounds cautiously, apparently attracted by some quality in the child's presence that called to something in their nature. When Calliope first beheld the infant Orpheus, she immediately recognized the signs of exceptional potential that mark certain rare mortals as suitable recipients of enhanced divine favor. The child's responses to sound demonstrated unusual sensitivity and discrimination even at this early age. His tiny hands moved in patterns that seemed to mirror the rhythmic structures of music played around him. His eyes followed movement with unusual focus and intelligence. More significantly to Calliope's divine perception, Orpheus possessed that rare combination of natural talent and spiritual receptivity that would allow him to channel divine inspiration without losing his essential humanity, without being overwhelmed or destroyed by forces beyond normal mortal capacity to contain. The goddess chose to manifest her favor through a series of gentle interventions that enhanced the child's natural development without overwhelming his human nature. She blessed his vocal cords with the capacity to produce sounds of exceptional purity and range. She blessed his hearing with the ability to perceive harmonic relationships that escaped ordinary mortal detection. She blessed his hands with the dexterity necessary to master even the most challenging musical instruments. But these enhancements worked gradually, unfolding slowly over years, allowing Orpheus to grow into his abilities naturally, rather than being suddenly transformed by powers he could not understand or control. He experienced his development as the fruit of practice and study, never knowing how much divine assistance quietly supported his efforts. Calliope's patronage also extended to ensuring that Orpheus received the finest musical education available to mortals. She gently guided circumstances, creating opportunities for him to encounter teachers who possess not only technical expertise, but also the wisdom to nurture spiritual development alongside artistic training, who understood that true musicianship involved more than mere technical proficiency. As Orpheus matured from child to youth to man, the extent of Calliope's favor became increasingly apparent in his abilities. His voice acquired a power and beauty that could move listeners to profound emotional states, could make warriors weep, and comforted the grief-stricken. His mastery of the lyre progressed at a rate that amazed even his most experienced teachers, his fingers seeming to find correct strings and pressures instinctively, as if the instrument itself wanted to help him create beauty. More remarkably, his music began demonstrating effects that extended beyond normal human responses. Animals would abandon their fear to approach when he played. Plants seemed to lean toward him, trees swaying even when no wind blew. Even stones, those most inanimate of objects, seemed to respond to his melodies in ways that defied ordinary explanation. The legendary lyre that would become Orpheus's most famous attribute came into his possession through divine providence. The instrument had originally been crafted by Hermes, later enhanced by Apollo himself. When Apollo learned of Calliope's special interest in the young Thracian prince, he decided to present the lyre to Orpheus as a gesture of support for his half-sister's protégé, as an investment in the success of her educational project. The moment Orpheus first touched this divine instrument, something shifted in the very air around him. The lyre responded to his touch with sensitivity exceeding anything possible with mortal-crafted instruments. Its strings vibrated in harmony with his intentions, his emotions, his deepest artistic impulses, rather than merely responding to physical manipulation. Under Orpheus's skilled hands, guided by Calliope's steady inspiration, the lyre's music could accomplish remarkable things. Stones would move from their resting places, not violently but gently, rolling into new arrangements as if participating in a slow dance. Trees would uproot themselves and walk closer to hear his performances, their massive forms moving with surprising grace, their roots pulling free of earth without effort, seeking better positions from which to receive his music. The effect of Orpheus's playing on wild animals became the subject of countless stories that spread throughout the ancient world. Fierce predators would abandon their hunting to lie peacefully beside their natural prey, all aggression suspended, all hunger forgotten while they listened to melodies that awakened their capacity for beauty appreciation. Bears emerged from caves to sit attentively like students before a beloved teacher. Wolves howled in harmonious accompaniment, their voices adding depth to his songs. Even the most dangerous serpents would coil themselves into decorative patterns around his feet, rendered harmless by the power of his art. The power of Orpheus's music to influence human behavior proved equally remarkable, though always gentle, never coercive. His songs could inspire warriors to acts of unprecedented courage, or convince them to lay down their weapons and seek peaceful resolutions to conflicts. Lovers separated by family feuds found their obstacles dissolving when Orpheus performed compositions celebrating the transcendent power of genuine affection, parents softening, old enmities reconsidered. The source of these, almost miraculous abilities lay not in supernatural powers artificially imposed upon Orpheus's mortal nature, but in the perfect harmony existing between his human dedication to artistic excellence and Calliope's divine inspiration flowing through him. The goddess had not transformed him into something other than human. She had instead awakened and enhanced the highest possibilities inherent in mortal artistic achievement. His music succeeded in producing supernatural effects because it expressed divine truths through genuinely human experience and emotion, creating a synthesis that neither purely mortal nor purely divine art could achieve independently. The divine element gave his music power and reached beyond normal mortal capacity. The human element kept it grounded, relatable, able to touch mortal hearts. Calliope's ongoing relationship with Orpheus required careful, delicate management to maintain this balance. She provided guidance and inspiration without overwhelming his individual creativity, offering suggestions and insights that helped him develop his own artistic voice, rather than simply becoming a channel for her divine will. She spoke to him sometimes in dreams, sometimes in moments of quiet contemplation, her voice gentle, encouraging, guiding, but never commanding. The goddess also protected Orpheus from various dangers that threatened mortals who achieved exceptional prominence in artistic fields. His growing reputation attracted attention both helpful and harmful. Rival musicians who resented his success, political leaders seeking to exploit his influence for their own purposes, various supernatural beings who viewed his abilities as either threats to their own authority or opportunities for manipulation. Calliope's protective interventions, while subtle enough to avoid compromising Orpheus's human agency and free will, ensured that he could pursue his artistic development without being destroyed by the jealousy, ambition, or malice of others. The relationship between Calliope and Orpheus served important functions within the broader cosmic order. His success as a mortal artist who acknowledged and honored the divine sources of his inspiration provided a positive example, a counterbalance to the negative lessons offered by figures like Thamyris and the daughters of Pierus. Orpheus demonstrated that mortals could achieve truly extraordinary artistic accomplishments without falling into the pride and presumption that led to sorrow and loss. His performances at various festivals and religious ceremonies helped strengthen connections between mortal communities and their divine patrons. His music served as a bridge, making divine presence more accessible to ordinary human experience, translating the overwhelming radiance of pure divinity into something mortals could receive without being blinded or burned. Orpheus understood what others had failed to grasp, that the greatest art comes not from competing with the gods, not from trying to prove mortal superiority or independence, but from collaborating with divine powers, from opening oneself to inspiration and guidance while contributing one's own human experience, emotion, and dedicated craft. He knew that he was a channel, not the source. He knew that the music flowing through him came from somewhere beyond himself, and this knowledge did not diminish him but rather freed him to achieve things he could never have accomplished through pride and isolation. In his humility he found greatness. In his reverence he found power. In his collaboration with Calliope, he achieved immortality not just of fame but of genuine artistic truth, creating works that would inspire others for countless generations to come. His life, though it would eventually end in tragedy, as all mortal lives must end in one way or another, stands as eternal testimony to what becomes possible when mortals approach divine inspiration with open hearts, humble spirits, and genuine dedication to the creation of beauty. Calliope's patronage of Orpheus reflected her broader understanding of the Muses' profound responsibility for preserving and transmitting the great traditions that formed the foundation of cultural identity and continuity. The goddess recognized that epic poetry and heroic narrative required more than simple technical skill or even divine inspiration alone. They demanded deep understanding of the moral and spiritual principles that distinguish genuine heroism from mere physical prowess or temporary military success, that separated actions worthy of eternal remembrance from deeds that deserve to be forgotten. The concept of kleos, a word meaning glory, fame, or renown, but carrying depths of significance that simple translation cannot capture, represented one of the most important aspects of ancient understanding about the relationship between individual actions and cultural memory. Kleos went far beyond simple historical record-keeping or personal aggrandizement. It encompassed instead a sophisticated understanding of how individual actions could contribute to the broader cultural narrative defining civilizational values and collective aspirations. It was about becoming part of the eternal story, about achieving a form of immortality through being remembered, through having one's deeds preserved in song and story. Calliope's role as guardian of epic poetry made her the primary divine authority responsible for determining which mortal deeds deserve the preservation and celebration that Kleos provided. This was not a light responsibility. The power to grant or withhold eternal remembrance was, in its own way, as significant as the power to grant or withhold life itself. This responsibility required her to evaluate not only the magnitude and difficulty of heroic achievements, but also their moral significance and their contribution to human flourishing and the advancement of civilization. A warrior who won countless battles through superior strength or tactical skill might earn temporary fame, might be celebrated in his own lifetime, but only those whose actions embodied the highest virtues and served the greater good, not just personal glory or tribal interests, could achieve the eternal remembrance constituting true kleos. The process by which Calliope selected mortal heroes for immortalization through epic poetry involved careful, patient observation of their entire lives, not just their most dramatic moments. She monitored the careers of promising individuals throughout their lifetimes, noting not only their public accomplishments, but also their private struggles with moral dilemmas, their responses to situations that tested their character when no one was watching, when there was no audience to impress. Heroes who maintained their integrity under pressure, who chose difficult but righteous paths over easier alternatives that might have brought more immediate rewards, who demonstrated genuine concern for the welfare of others rather than obsessive focus on personal glory. These were the individuals who earned her special attention and favor. The goddess understood that creating lasting heroic narratives required more than simply recording the facts of exceptional deeds, more than creating a list of accomplishments or a chronological account of events. The transformation of raw historical events into inspiring artistic truth demanded careful selection of details, thoughtful arrangement of narrative elements, and the incorporation of universal themes that would resonate with audiences across different generations and cultural contexts, that would speak to something essential in human nature, that transcended particular times and places. This creative process involved collaboration between Calliope's divine wisdom and the human insight of mortal poets, who possessed the cultural knowledge and emotional understanding necessary to make heroic stories accessible to their contemporaries, who knew what examples and images would move their particular audiences. The selection of appropriate bards to serve as vessels for heroic inspiration represented one of Calliope's most crucial responsibilities. Not every talented poet possessed the combination of technical skill, moral sensitivity, and spiritual receptivity necessary to handle the transmission of heroic narratives without corrupting their essential meaning. The goddess sought individuals who combined genuine artistic ability with deep respect for truth and the significance of the stories they would tell. The process of divine inspiration through which Calliope transmitted heroic narratives to chosen poets involved a complex, delicate interplay between supernatural guidance and human creativity. Rather than simply dictating completed poems to passive recipients, which would have produced works that sounded divine but lacked human warmth, the goddess worked through subtle influences that enhanced her chosen bards' natural abilities while allowing them to maintain their individual artistic voices. She might provide sudden insights into character motivations, helping the poet understand why a hero made a particular choice. She might suggest powerful metaphors that illuminated abstract concepts, making them concrete and vivid. She might guide poets toward narrative structures that enhanced the emotional impact of their stories, that created patterns of tension and release, foreshadowing and fulfillment. This collaborative approach ensured that heroic epics retained the human authenticity necessary to connect with mortal audiences, while incorporating divine wisdom that elevated them beyond mere entertainment, into vehicles for cultural education and spiritual development, into something that could shape how people understood themselves and their world. The relationship between divine inspiration and narrative accuracy required careful balance. Calliope understood that completely factual accounts of heroic deeds, while historically valuable, often lacked the narrative coherence and emotional resonance necessary to create lasting cultural impact. Real events were messy, random, full of irrelevant details and anticlimactic moments, but excessive fictional embellishment could distort the moral lessons that heroic stories were meant to convey. The goddess resolved this tension by guiding her chosen poets toward a form of artistic truth that captured the essential meaning and significance of heroic deeds, while adapting specific details to enhance their educational and inspirational value. The goal was not perfect historical accuracy, but rather perfect transmission of moral and spiritual truth. The transmission of heroic narratives through inspired bards served important social and political functions within communities. These stories provided shared reference points that helped define cultural values and behavioral expectations, creating common understanding about what constituted admirable conduct and worthy aspirations. Children learned what kind of person they should strive to become. Adults found guidance for their own moral decisions by considering how legendary heroes had handled similar challenges. The preservation of these traditions through oral poetry required extraordinary feats of memory and performance skill. Master bards needed to memorize thousands of lines of verse while maintaining perfect accuracy across multiple performances and numerous years of practice. Calliope's inspiration enhanced these natural abilities, providing her chosen poets with exceptional recall and the capacity to adapt their performances to different audiences without losing essential narrative elements. The goddess also ensured that heroic narratives remained relevant to changing circumstances by guiding different generations of bards toward interpretations and emphases that addressed contemporary concerns while preserving core moral teachings. A story about courage might be presented differently during peacetime than during war, with different aspects of the hero's character receiving emphasis depending on what lessons were most needed. The concept of divine responsibility for transforming human experience into immortal artistic truth extended beyond individual heroic narratives to encompass the broader mission of preserving and transmitting the accumulated wisdom of civilization. Calliope understood that each generation of mortals faced unique challenges requiring both practical knowledge inherited from predecessors and creative adaptations addressing new circumstances. Her role involved ensuring this cultural transmission occurred effectively, with essential knowledge preserved while remaining accessible and applicable to changing conditions. Through her patient work across countless generations, through her careful selection and inspiration of poets who would serve as vessels for eternal truths, Calliope ensured that the great stories would never be lost, that the examples of genuine heroism would remain available to inspire and guide all who came after. Kleos was her gift to mortals, the promise that excellence would be remembered, that the truly good and beautiful would not disappear into the oblivion of time. That meaning could be permanent even in a world where individual lives were temporary. This was sacred work, this preservation of memory, this transformation of mortal deeds into eternal song, and Calliope performed it with the dedication and care it deserved, ensuring that the light of genuine heroism would continue to illuminate the path for generations yet unborn. The diplomatic role of the 9 sisters in managing relationships among the Olympian gods represented another dimension of their cosmic function, one less celebrated in poetry, but no less significant in maintaining the delicate balance of divine and mortal affairs. The Muses' effectiveness as mediators and peacemakers stemmed from their unique position within the divine hierarchy and their particular approach to conflict resolution, an approach that sought to transform potential disputes into opportunities for collaborative creation and mutual recognition. When tensions arose among the Olympian deities, as they inevitably did, for the gods possessed passions and pride as mortals did, magnified by their divine power, the Muses often found themselves called upon to suggest resolutions that would preserve the dignity of all parties while preventing destructive outcomes. When Poseidon and Athena disputed over the patronage of a great city that would eventually bear Athena's name, their rivalry had escalated to a dangerous point. Both deities were prepared to unleash displays of divine power that might well have destroyed the very city they sought to protect. The contest between sea god and wisdom goddess threatened to become a catastrophe for the mortals caught between them. The Muses intervened with a proposal. Let both gods demonstrate their gifts to the people. Let mortals themselves choose their patron, but structure the contest as an opportunity to create lasting monuments celebrating divine generosity rather than divine wrath. Calliope personally composed verses that would commemorate whichever deity the people chose, ensuring that even the one not selected would receive appropriate honor and recognition, would not lose face before the other gods. This approach allowed both Poseidon and Athena to participate without shame, since the artistic commemoration would preserve their dignity regardless of outcome. Euterpe contributed musical compositions for the ceremony, melodies designed to evoke reverence and gratitude rather than partisan excitement. The music created an atmosphere that encouraged observers to focus on the magnificent gifts being offered, rather than on competition or conflict. The success of this intervention established a pattern the Muses would employ repeatedly, transforming conflict into collaborative performance, channeling divine passion into creative rather than destructive expression. When Apollo and Artemis found themselves at odds over appropriate responses to mortal offenses against their mother Leto, the Muses organized a collaborative performance, allowing both archer deities to express their protective instincts through artistic rather than violent means, creating beauty instead of devastation. The Muses proved particularly valuable in managing Apollo's relationships with other deities, whose domains overlapped with his own extensive areas of influence. As god of music, poetry, prophecy, healing, and the sun itself, Apollo's authority intersected with many others' interests in ways that could generate friction if not carefully handled. When Dionysus arrived on Olympus, establishing his own authority over aspects of artistic inspiration, particularly those involving ecstatic religious experience and dramatic performance, tensions naturally arose with Apollo's more structured, rational approach to cultural development. The potential for destructive conflict between these different visions of divine inspiration was considerable. The Muses recognized that both approaches served important functions in mortal spiritual and artistic development. They worked to create synthesis, rather than allowing competition between the two gods. Thalia played a crucial role by developing new forms of comic performance that incorporated elements from both Apolline rationality and Dionysiac emotional release, demonstrating that structure could enhance rather than constrain spontaneity. Polyhymnia developed sacred music serving both Apolline and Dionysiac ceremonies, her compositions incorporating mathematical precision with emotional intensity, showing that these qualities could coexist and strengthen each other. The Muses' diplomatic skills proved valuable even in dealing with deities whose domains lay entirely outside artistic sphere, but whose actions could significantly impact mortal cultural development. When Ares planned military campaigns that would have resulted in the destruction of important centers of learning and artistic achievement, the Muses approached him not with direct opposition, which would likely have been ineffective and might have escalated the conflict, but by appealing to his pride in strategic brilliance. They offered to compose epic poems celebrating his martial prowess, but structured their offer so that the most glorious verses would commemorate victories achieved through wisdom rather than simple destruction. Calliope's negotiations with the war god required delicate handling of his volatile temperament. She approached him with verses that praised his power, while also celebrating the greater glory that came from knowing when to fight and when to seek alternative solutions, from understanding that some victories were worth more than others. Similar challenges arose with other Olympians. Hera's complex feelings about Zeus's various romantic liaisons sometimes led her to target mortal communities that had honored her husband's offspring or lovers. The Muses addressed this problem by creating artistic works celebrating Hera's own dignity and authority as queen of the gods, emphasizing her essential role in maintaining cosmic order rather than focusing on personal conflicts. The effectiveness of these diplomatic interventions depended on the Muses' deep understanding of divine psychology, their ability to recognize what each deity truly valued beneath surface emotions and immediate reactions. They became expert at finding creative solutions that addressed underlying needs and concerns rather than just surface demands. Their success reflected their unique position as both servants and counselors within the Olympian hierarchy. As daughters of Zeus, they possessed sufficient status to approach other major deities with some equality rather than as mere supplicants. Their specialized knowledge of cultural and artistic matters gave them authority to speak on subjects lying outside the immediate expertise of gods whose domains focused on other aspects of existence. The Muses demonstrated that conflict often arose not from genuinely incompatible interests, but from failure of imagination, from inability to see creative solutions that could satisfy multiple parties simultaneously. Their artistic training, their practice in finding beautiful ways to combine different elements into harmonious wholes, equipped them perfectly for this mediating role. They taught, not through lectures but through example, that collaboration often produced better outcomes than competition, that divine authority need not be zero-sum, that honoring one god need not require dishonoring another. This diplomatic function, while less dramatic than their roles as inspirers of poetry and music, may have been equally important in maintaining the stability and harmony of the cosmic order, in preventing divine conflicts from spilling over into mortal realms, in ensuring that the gods work together rather than at cross purposes. Through patient work across countless generations, through countless small interventions and careful negotiations, the Muses helped maintain the delicate balance that allowed both divine and mortal realms to flourish, that kept the cosmic machinery running smoothly despite the passionate natures and occasionally conflicting interests of its divine operators. They were weavers of harmony, creators of peace, builders of bridges between different divine perspectives and purposes. And in this work, as in their more celebrated artistic functions, they demonstrated the power of creativity to transform conflict into collaboration, discord into beauty. The cosmic significance of the Muses' role as intermediaries between divine and mortal realms extended far beyond their specific functions in inspiring poetry, music, or scholarly pursuit. They served a fundamental purpose in the structure of reality itself, bridging a gap that might otherwise have left mortals isolated from the sources of ultimate truth and beauty. The Olympian gods, existing in states of perfection and eternity, possessed capabilities and perspectives that remained fundamentally different from mortal experience. Their perfection, while admirable and worthy of reverence, created a distance between divine reality and human understanding that could have made genuine connection impossible. How can the finite comprehend the infinite? How can the temporary understand the eternal? How can beings who know death truly grasp the perspective of those who are deathless? The Muses resolved this profound dilemma by serving as translators, as adapters, as gentle guides who could render divine perfection into graduated steps that mortals could actually follow in their own pursuit of excellence. Calliope's approach to this translation process demonstrated the sophisticated methodology all 9 sisters employed. When divine wisdom needed to be communicated to mortal audiences, she did not simply transmit abstract philosophical concepts that would have overwhelmed human intellectual capacity, that would have been like trying to pour an ocean into a cup. Instead, she embedded profound truths within heroic narratives, within stories illustrating divine principles through concrete examples of mortal behavior and its consequences. Her epic compositions allowed audiences to encounter ultimate reality through tales about individuals whose struggles and achievements they could understand, could relate to their own experiences. The abstract became concrete. The overwhelming became manageable. The infinite became accessible without ceasing to be infinite. The effectiveness of this approach lay in its recognition that mortal consciousness required concrete imagery and emotional engagement to grasp concepts that divine minds could apprehend directly. By clothing universal truths in particular stories about specific heroes facing recognizable challenges, Calliope made divine wisdom accessible without diminishing its essential profundity. Clio's historical methodology served similar bridging functions by demonstrating how divine will manifested itself through the apparently random events of mortal experience. Her chronicles revealed underlying patterns connecting individual incidents into meaningful sequences, illustrating divine justice and cosmic order, operating beneath the surface chaos of everyday life. Mortals who studied her historical accounts learned to recognize divine activity in their own circumstances, developed the capacity to align their actions with cosmic purposes, rather than simply pursuing immediate personal interests without regard for larger patterns and meanings. Euterpe's musical innovations provided another crucial bridge by demonstrating how technical skill could be elevated into transcendent artistic expression. Her compositions required performers to master complex instrumental techniques, while also developing the emotional sensitivity necessary to convey deeper meanings embedded within melodies. This combination of technical and spiritual development created educational experiences that prepared mortals for disciplined pursuit of excellence in any field, not just music. The philosophical implications of the Muses' existence as bridges between divine and mortal realms extended beyond their specific artistic functions to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of creativity itself. Their presence in the cosmic order suggested that creative activity represented more than simple human self-expression or entertainment. It suggested instead that creativity was a primary mechanism through which mortals could participate in the ongoing divine work of bringing order and beauty into existence, of transforming chaos into cosmos. This understanding elevated artistic creation from a peripheral cultural luxury to an essential spiritual practice connecting human consciousness with ultimate reality. To write a poem, to compose a song, to create any work of genuine beauty was to participate, however modestly, in the divine creative activity that had brought the universe itself into being. The Nine Sisters embodied the principle that genuine creativity required both divine inspiration and human effort, neither element being sufficient independently to produce works of lasting value and significance. Divine inspiration without human skill produced only unrealized potential. Human skill without divine inspiration produced only empty technical display. Their own collaborative performances demonstrated how individual talents could be enhanced through harmonious cooperation with others possessing complementary abilities, providing models for mortal artists seeking to achieve excellence through disciplined collaboration rather than isolated individual effort. This collaborative approach to creativity reflected deeper truths about the interconnected nature of existence itself, about the fundamental reality that nothing exists in isolation, that all things are woven together in a vast web of relationships and mutual dependencies. The Muses taught that acknowledging one's dependence on sources of wisdom and power transcending individual capability represented strength rather than weakness, maturity rather than inadequacy. It opened access to resources and insights remaining unavailable to those insisting on relying solely on their own limited abilities, who viewed the need for help as shameful rather than natural. Their role as ultimate sources of human cultural achievement became most apparent in their influence on the development of educational systems and intellectual traditions, preserving and transmitting accumulated knowledge across generational boundaries. The Nine Sisters understood that individual inspiration, however profound, would remain culturally insignificant unless it could be communicated effectively to others and integrated into ongoing traditions of learning and practice, unless it could become part of a living tradition passed from teacher to student across generations. Urania's contributions to mathematical and astronomical education demonstrated how divine inspiration could enhance mortal intellectual capabilities without replacing the careful observation and logical reasoning, forming the foundation of reliable knowledge. Her guidance helped mortal scholars develop methodologies for investigating natural phenomena that combined empirical observation with theoretical analysis, creating approaches to learning that remained effective long after the specific individuals who developed them had died. Polyhymnia's work in developing sacred music and religious ceremonies provided similar foundations for ongoing spiritual development within mortal communities. Her compositions established patterns and structures that could be adapted to address changing religious needs while maintaining their essential capacity to facilitate genuine encounters with divine reality, with the sacred dimension of existence. Through all these various functions, inspiring individual artists, guiding cultural traditions, mediating divine conflicts, translating eternal truths into temporal forms, the Muses fulfilled their cosmic purpose of ensuring that beauty, truth, and meaning would never be entirely absent from the mortal world, that the light of divine perfection would continue to shine, however dimly at times, in the realm of human experience. They were bridges, these 9 sisters, bridges between earth and heaven, between time and eternity, between the limited and the limitless. And as long as those bridges remained standing, mortals would never be entirely cut off from the sources of inspiration and meaning that made life worth living. The enduring power of the 9 sisters, as symbols of humanity's eternal quest to transform experience into transcendent art, reflected their remarkable success in creating cultural forms that remained meaningful across vastly different historical periods, social circumstances, and cultural contexts. Their influence on mortal artistic development had produced traditions and techniques that continued to inspire new generations of creators, long after the specific cultural contexts in which they originated had faded into history, had been transformed by time and change. This symbolic function of the Muses transcended their roles as individual deities with particular areas of expertise. They became representatives of the creative principle itself in all its various manifestations, embodiments of the eternal human drive to make meaning through artistic expression. Mortals who invoked their names or sought their inspiration were participating in a tradition, connecting them with countless previous generations of artists and scholars who had pursued similar goals through similar methods. They joined a great chain of seekers and creators stretching back to the very beginning of human culture. The universal appeal of this creative tradition reflected its foundation in aspects of human nature that remained remarkably constant across different cultures and historical periods. The desire to create beauty, to preserve truth, to communicate meaning, to achieve excellence. These appear to be inherent characteristics of human consciousness finding expression in every known civilization, regardless of specific religious beliefs or social structures. The Muses' success in establishing themselves as eternal symbols of this creative impulse demonstrated their profound understanding of both divine purposes and human nature, their ability to recognize what was essential versus what was merely contingent or temporary. They had created cultural forms and traditions that served essential spiritual functions, while also providing practical benefits enhancing the quality of mortal life. Their artistic innovations improved communication between people, strengthened community bonds, preserved valuable knowledge that might otherwise have been lost, and provided sources of inspiration, helping individuals cope with the inevitable challenges and limitations of human existence. The cosmic order that the Nine Sisters helped maintain through their various functions represented a sophisticated balance between divine authority and mortal freedom, a balance allowing for continued development and growth within stable frameworks of meaning and purpose. Their intermediary role ensured that divine guidance remained available to mortals without overwhelming human agency, without turning people into mere puppets of divine will. Their preservation of cultural traditions provided continuity, allowing each generation to build upon the achievements of their predecessors, rather than having to reinvent everything from scratch. The philosophical significance of this cosmic arrangement extended beyond questions of artistic and cultural development to encompass fundamental issues about the relationship between finite and infinite, temporal and eternal, human and divine. The Muses' existence suggested that these apparent oppositions could be resolved through creative synthesis, rather than requiring the domination of one element over the other. Their success in achieving this synthesis through artistic and educational activities demonstrated the unique power of creative expression to transcend logical contradictions, to reveal underlying unities remaining hidden from purely rational analysis. Beauty and meaning they helped bring into existence served as evidence that the cosmos itself possessed aesthetic and moral dimensions apprehensible through properly developed human faculties. The universe was not merely mechanical, not merely a collection of physical forces operating according to impersonal laws. It had meaning, had purpose, had beauty woven into its very structure. As ages passed and mortal civilizations rose and fell, as empires expanded and collapsed, as cultures transformed and evolved, the influence of the Nine Sisters persisted through the traditions they had established and the creative principles they embodied. Their names became synonymous with the highest aspirations of human consciousness. Their stories served as permanent reminders that excellence remained achievable for those willing to pursue it with appropriate dedication and humility, that the gap between what mortals were and what they might become could be crossed through patient effort guided by divine inspiration. The eternal legacy of the Muses lay not in any specific artistic works or cultural achievements, for all specific works eventually fade. All particular achievements eventually pass into history. Their legacy lay instead in their demonstration that the gap between mortal limitation and divine perfection could be bridged through creative activity, honoring both human effort and divine inspiration. They showed that mortals could participate meaningfully in the cosmic work of bringing beauty and meaning into existence, could transform their own experiences and those of others through disciplined pursuit of artistic and intellectual excellence. This timeless message continued to resonate with each new generation of creators who discovered that their individual efforts, however modest they might seem, connected them with the eternal creative principle that the Nine Sisters represented and embodied. In seeking the Muses' inspiration and following their example, mortals found that they could transcend the apparent meaninglessness of purely temporal existence, could contribute to the ongoing divine project of filling the cosmos with beauty, truth, and significance that would outlast any individual life. The Muses thus achieved a form of immortality, surpassing even their divine nature. They became permanent fixtures in human consciousness, enduring as long as mortals continued to seek beauty, to preserve truth, to strive for excellence in their various endeavors. Their eternal legacy lay in having established creativity itself as a sacred activity, connecting finite beings with infinite possibilities, ensuring that the human quest for transcendence through art would never cease, would continue as long as humans walk the earth, and turned their faces toward the stars. Section 12. The ongoing gift. Creation without end. 9 sacred nights beneath stars that witnessed the beginning of something that would never end. 9 nights that brought forth 9 eternal guardians of everything that makes existence beautiful and meaningful. From the loving union of Zeus and Mnemosyne came Calliope, Clio, Euterpe, Thalia, Melpomene, Terpsichore, Erato, Polyhymnia, and Urania. Each sister governed a different domain of artistic and intellectual achievement. Each brought her own unique gifts to the great work. Together, they formed a creative force that would guide and inspire mortal aspirations for all the ages to come. They established their home on Mount Helicon, where springs still flow with waters touched by divine presence, where the air still vibrates with creative potential waiting to be awakened. They made their second dwelling on Mount Parnassus, where they collaborated with Apollo in the great work of bringing order and beauty to artistic expression, of making divine inspiration accessible to mortal recipients. Through countless generations, they have watched over human creative endeavors, offering inspiration to those who approach them with humble hearts, teaching hard lessons to those whose pride overcame their wisdom, celebrating and supporting those like Orpheus, who understood the proper balance between human effort and divine gift. They have mediated conflicts among the gods, preventing divine disputes from destroying mortal achievements. They have translated eternal truths into temporal forms that human minds could grasp. They have preserved the great stories, the heroic deeds, the beautiful works that might otherwise have been lost to the erosion of time and the frailty of mortal memory. They have served as bridges between earth and heaven, between the limited and the limitless, between what is and what might be. The gift they offer remains available to all who seek it with sincerity and reverence. The springs still flow on Helicon's sacred slopes. The divine presences still watch over those who dedicate themselves to the creation of beauty and the pursuit of excellence. The inspiration still comes to those who open themselves to receive it, who approach creative work not as ego-driven competition, but as sacred collaboration with forces greater than themselves. In every poem written with genuine feeling, every song composed with true inspiration, every dance performed with authentic expression, every work of scholarship pursued with dedication to truth, the Muses' influence continues. Their gift keeps giving, generation after generation, creating an unbroken chain of artistic and intellectual achievement, linking the distant past to the present moment, and extending forward into futures we cannot yet imagine. The 9 sisters remain, constant and eternal, watching over human creativity with patient love, ready to inspire all who approach them with open hearts and humble spirits, all who understand that the greatest achievements come not from isolated individual effort, but from harmonious collaboration between mortal dedication and divine inspiration. Their story is not finished, will never be finished as long as humans continue to create, to seek beauty, to pursue excellence, to transform experience into art that speaks to something eternal in the human soul. This is their eternal gift to the world, the promise that inspiration will never entirely cease, that beauty will never be completely lost, that the human capacity for creative transcendence will endure through all changes and chances of mortal existence. May their presence bring peace to your rest, gentle dreams to your sleep, and renewed inspiration when you wake to greet another day filled with possibilities for creating beauty and meaning in the world. There exists a quality of stillness in the sacred places where the Muses dwell, a particular kind of silence that is not empty but full, pregnant with possibility, alive with potential waiting to be awakened into form. Those who have made the pilgrimage to Mount Helicon speak of experiencing this stillness, even before reaching the sacred springs, before setting foot on the mountain slopes. It begins in the valleys below, a subtle shift in the quality of awareness, a gentle quieting of the constant mental chatter that ordinarily fills human consciousness with noise and distraction. As pilgrims begin their ascent, climbing the winding paths that lead upward through ancient groves and past weathered stones, this stillness deepens. The air seems to grow more transparent, more luminous. Colors become somehow more vivid, yet also more gentle, more saturated yet easier on the eyes. Sounds grow clearer, bird song, wind through leaves, the distant murmur of springs, while harsh noises seem to fade or soften. In these quiet spaces between earth and heaven, between the ordinary world below and the sacred realm above, something shifts in human perception. The boundaries between inner and outer begin to blur. The sharp distinction between self and world softens. There is a sense of expanding beyond the usual confines of individual identity, of becoming more porous, more receptive, more open to influences and insights flowing from sources beyond personal consciousness. This is the state the Muses cultivate in those who seek their gifts. Not the dramatic overwhelming that might come from direct divine manifestation, which few mortals could withstand without being destroyed or driven mad, but rather a gentle opening, a gradual expansion of capacity, a slow awakening to dimensions of experience ordinarily overlooked in the busy distractions of daily life. The sacred springs themselves embody this quality of stillness. Their waters flow continuously, yet quietly, bubbling up from deep sources and running down the mountain in streams that sing softly to themselves. The water is cool but not cold, clear but mysteriously deep, ordinary water molecules transformed by long contact with divine presence into something that can affect consciousness itself. To drink from these springs is to introduce this quality of stillness into your own being, to carry it back with you when you descend to the ordinary world, to have access to it when you sit down to create, to remember that creativity flows most freely not from frantic effort, but from relaxed receptivity, from opening yourself to influences and inspirations that cannot be forced or manufactured through will alone. The Muses teach, through the very quality of the spaces they inhabit and create, that inspiration requires a kind of relaxed attention, a state of alert receptivity that is simultaneously focused and open, disciplined and spontaneous, intentional and allowing. This is why their sacred places feel the way they do, calm but not sleepy, peaceful but not boring, restful yet somehow energizing. They create optimal conditions for the kind of consciousness that allows creativity to emerge naturally, the way plants grow when conditions are right, not through force, but through patient cultivation of appropriate environments. In the caves deep within Helicon, where the Muses gather for their private collaborations, this quality reaches its fullest expression. The darkness is not oppressive, but womb-like, nurturing, protective. The silence is profound yet somehow musical, as if you could hear the potential for sound itself, the space from which all music emerges and to which it returns. When the 9 sisters perform in these hidden sanctuaries, creating works of art that no mortal will ever witness, they do so not from need or obligation, but from pure joy in the creative act itself, from delight in the process of bringing beauty into existence regardless of whether anyone observes or applauds. This is perhaps their deepest teaching, that creativity at its highest serves no purpose beyond itself, that the creation of beauty is its own justification, that art needs no external validation to be worthwhile and meaningful. The quiet spaces where inspiration lives are not only geographical, they exist also as inner states, as qualities of consciousness that can be cultivated through practice and patience. Every mortal carries within themselves a potential helicon, a sacred inner mountain where springs of inspiration might flow if only the conditions could be made right. The Muses' gift to humanity includes not only their direct inspiration of particular artists, but also their teaching, mostly by example rather than explicit instruction, of how to create the inner conditions that make inspiration possible. Silence, stillness, patient receptivity, humble openness to influences from beyond the ego, willingness to serve beauty rather than demanding that beauty serve personal ambitions, dedication to the work itself rather than obsession with rewards or recognition. These are the qualities cultivated in the quiet spaces where inspiration lives, where the muses dwell, where mortal creativity can touch something eternal and bring it into temporal form. As you rest now, as you allow yourself to sink into stillness and silence, perhaps you touch something of this quality yourself. Perhaps in the quiet spaces of your own consciousness, springs are even now beginning to bubble up, carrying images and ideas and inspirations that will emerge more fully when you wake. The muses watch over all who sleep and dream, for dreams themselves are a form of creativity, a way the psyche creates meaning and processes experience through image and narrative. In sleep, the boundaries that ordinarily separate conscious from unconscious, self from other, mortal from divine, these boundaries grow permeable, allowing influences to flow more freely. So rest now in the quiet spaces. Let the stillness deepen. Let inspiration come in its own time, in its own way, gentle and patient as water flowing from sacred springs, persistent and life-giving as the muses' eternal care for all who seek beauty and meaning. As this story draws toward its gentle close, as we prepare to release these words into silence and let sleep claim its natural territory, one final truth remains to be spoken about the 9 sisters and their enduring presence in the cosmos. The muses make a promise through their very existence, through their patient work across countless generations, through their unwavering dedication to the preservation and inspiration of beauty. It is a promise they have never broken, a covenant they maintain with perfect faithfulness. The promise is this: that beauty will endure, that meaning will persist, that the human capacity to create, to transform experience into art, to touch something transcendent through disciplined practice and humble receptivity, this capacity will never be entirely extinguished, no matter how dark the times may seem, no matter how much chaos or destruction may temporarily prevail. This promise offers profound comfort in a world where so much is temporary, where everything mortal eventually fades and passes away, where loss seems inevitable and entropy always wins in the end. Against the tide of dissolution and decay, the muses stand as guardians of what endures, preservers of what matters, protectors of the fragile, beautiful things that give life meaning and make existence worthwhile. They cannot prevent individual works from being lost. Libraries burn, manuscripts decay, memories fade. They cannot save every artist from obscurity or every beautiful creation from destruction. The physical manifestations of art are as subject to time and chance as everything else in the mortal realm. But they can and do ensure that the creative impulse itself persists, that the capacity to create beauty remains alive in human consciousness, that each generation will have access to inspiration and the possibility of transcendence through artistic expression. This is their true gift, more valuable than any individual poem or song or dance. The preservation of creativity itself as a living force in the world, a fountain that never runs dry, a light that never goes entirely out. When civilizations collapse and centuries of accumulated culture seem to vanish overnight, When wars destroy the works of generations and knowledge appears to be lost forever, the Muses ensure that somewhere, somehow, the essential patterns and principles are preserved, that the capacity to recreate what was lost remains available to those who seek it. They work through individual artists who serve as vessels and transmitters of traditions that might otherwise die out completely. They work through the mysterious processes of cultural memory that preserve patterns even when specific details are forgotten. They work through the deep structures of human consciousness itself, through innate capacities and inclinations that lead each new generation to rediscover fundamental artistic truths, even without direct instruction. The promise of beauty enduring offers hope that is neither naive nor unfounded. It is not the shallow optimism that denies real loss and genuine tragedy. The Muses know better than most about loss. They have witnessed the fall of empires, the death of languages, the disappearance of entire artistic traditions they had nurtured for centuries. But their hope is deeper than circumstances, rooted in their understanding of the fundamental nature of reality itself. Beauty is not merely a human creation, not simply a subjective preference or cultural construction. It reflects something essential about the cosmos, something woven into the very structure of existence. The same mathematical relationships that govern the movements of planets also appear in musical harmonies and architectural proportions. The same patterns that organize growth in nature also structure effective narratives and compelling compositions. Beauty is not arbitrary. It connects to deep truths about the nature of reality itself. This is why beauty endures, not because humans stubbornly insist on creating it despite all obstacles, though that is also true, but because the universe itself tends toward beauty. Because the fundamental creative principle that brought the cosmos into being continues to operate, continues to generate order and meaning and aesthetic value. The Muses align themselves with this fundamental creative principle. They serve it, channel it, make it accessible to mortal consciousness in forms that can be grasped and worked with. They are not the source of creativity. That source is even more ultimate, more mysterious. But they are faithful conduits, reliable bridges, patient teachers. And so they make their promise and keep it. Generation after generation, age after age, that beauty will endure, that inspiration will remain available, that the springs on Helicon will continue to flow, that those who seek with humble hearts will find, that creativity will persist as long as humans exist to practice it. This promise extends even into your sleep, into your dreams, into the quiet restoration that happens in darkness when conscious effort ceases and deeper processes take over. The Muses watch over sleepers as well as wakers, for both sleep and waking have their gifts. Both offer their own forms of creativity and renewal. As you sink now into deeper rest, as these words fade and release you into silence, carry with you this promise: that beauty endures, that meaning persists, that the capacity to create and appreciate and be transformed by art is your birthright as a human being, guarded and nurtured by divine presences who have maintained their watch since the beginning of time. The 9 sisters remain constant in their care. The springs continue to flow. The sacred mountains still stand, anchoring earth to heaven. The gifts continue to be given to all who seek them properly. And so we come to the end of this telling, to the completion of this journey through the story of the Muses and their eternal work in the world. But it is not truly an end, for their story continues, will always continue, as long as humans create and seek beauty and strive for excellence. May you rest peacefully in the knowledge of their presence. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep deep and restoring. May you wake refreshed, renewed, carrying within you something of the inspiration they offer so freely to all who approach them with open hearts. The Muses have given their gifts. The story has been told. The promise has been spoken. Now comes the time for silence, for rest, for the quiet renewal that prepares us to greet another day and all its possibilities for creating meaning and beauty in the world. Sleep well, dream gently, and know that you are held in the great pattern, the eternal story, the ongoing creative work that the Muses guard and guide. Their gift endures, beauty persists, meaning remains, and all shall be well, in ways deeper than words can express, in the quiet spaces where inspiration lives, where the divine touches the mortal, where springs of creativity flow eternally from sources that never run dry. Rest now. All is well. The Muses watch over your sleep, as they have watched over humanity's creative dreams since the very beginning, and their watch will continue, faithful and patient, until the very end of time itself. Rest, peace, beauty enduring, always